Okay. Hello. This is very strange because I'm talking to myself, but I can see a lot of waves, so that's really nice. Hi, everybody. This festival, this is all part of the Stay Home with Chocolate Festival, and it's been really amazing so far. I've seen so many different places and met new chocolate friends, and I'm really grateful to everybody who's put this together. It's been a really great week. Definitely a pick-me-up for a hard time for everybody. So welcome to Canada. And my house on this relatively gray day, but we've had some sun, so that's been nice. Hi. So today we're going to talk about something different. I've been seeing a lot of people doing amazing demos around baking and drinks and how to make chocolate, and it's been really educational. One of the biggest things about craft chocolate is how much there is to learn about it. And I think that's what's so exciting, is because there's something new all the time that I'm learning. And so as an artist, I decided how I had to try to figure out how I could contribute to this community other than selling the chocolate, because so I did live in Victoria, BC for about 3 years, and while I was there, I encountered the Chocolate Project, and it was amazing. It was like a whole new world, because I've loved chocolate forever, and I found out what chocolate can really be. So I just was like, wow, and I wanted to learn more and more and more. Hi. So I decided to just keep learning, and then when I got back to Guelph, Ontario, which is my hometown, I couldn't find craft chocolate, and I just decided that the city and like the area needed to learn more about it. We have tons of amazing chocolate makers in Canada. There's so many all over the world, and so I just started to figure out how could I bring that here. That turned into a business. I started to order a lot of chocolate and create events, go to markets. I'm now selling to stores in the city, and a really new and wonderful, as a response to everybody having to stay home, there's a new business called Guelph Box, and they've been awesome about taking the chocolate in and getting it to people's homes. So people are still able to get awesome chocolate. So last year I decided to go to Montreal, and I wanted to meet some of the chocolate makers. I went to Attack Choc, which is an amazing store. They have such a wonderful selection, just like the candy bar in Toronto. And I also went and I met Elfie and Maxime at Contu. They were wonderful, and they took us into their space and showed us the process of making chocolate. And when I saw that, I was like, okay, wow, this is an art. There's just so many different pieces that are involved, lots of timing. There's just so many different complexities and things. Hi, Juan. I'm going to talk about your stuff in a minute. So many different things involved, and as a painter, it really spoke to me, and I decided I wanted to try to create a series that really demonstrated the artistry that's involved in making chocolate and craft chocolate, and how I can share that with lots of people. So the series was I'm a landscape painter. I do a lot of flowers. I do a lot of different paintings, but I really love painting landscapes, and the origins where the cacao grows are just absolutely gorgeous. So I have also, as well, for a long time experimented with natural inks, natural paints, pigments. So it was kind of an easy jump into finding out how to play with cacao. Okay, so if you're just joining, we're going to talk about creating paintings. I'm going to go over here. Okay, wait, I'm going to flip the phone around so you can see my setup. There we go. Okay, so hello everybody. I'm going to turn on this. I don't know if you can see this very well. You can see my reflection a lot here. Okay, yeah, I still see my reflection. Okay, so that part's not that important. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through all the different pieces and setup that are involved in creating a cacao painting. It actually smells like brownies when I make the painting, which is really fun. And yeah, that part's really fun. It's kind of like baking and making chocolate, but the end result doesn't really have anything to do with flavor at all, which I wish it did. Another project I'm working on, which is a kid's book, has to do more with cocoa butter paintings, and you can eat the end result of that. So that's kind of fun. So here we go. These are some of the elements that go into making the paintings. Let's see here. These are husks. I got husks from Eric at Des Bars, and Contu sent me these ones. They're hidden treasure husks. I don't have a hidden treasure package right now. I wish I still had those. But this is their Silk Road bar, which is amazing. But their hidden treasure bar is really unique because it isn't just cacao. It's actually a natural cross between cacao and kaposu fruits in Peru. So it's very, very rare. And the husks are really like a rich, almost yellowy, orangey, like a lighter color. So this is the husks, and this is after the husks have been ground. The color really kind of pops. And then this is after I've made ink with it. So the ink kind of creates these. This is more of an evaporation painting, and the ink dries and it creates like really beautiful patterns. And so this one here has kind of a more yellowy, bright kind of color. The color's not showing up awesome on here, but that's okay. So I'm just kind of showing you what the difference is between the different pigments. The pigments are based on the different husks, and so these ones were from Des Bars, and these ones are a little bit different again. They get a little more pinky. I think it has to do as well with the acidity level. And then this is what I did with that one. I put it into a cast iron pan and I roasted them even more till they darkened, and then I ground them up, and I'm using an old coffee grinder to grind up the husks. Okay, so once I take the husks, and I'm going to do a quick side note. So Juan Gonzalez, thank you so much for the cocoa powder and then cocoa butter. I do have a painting that is based on an image that he sent me from his trip to Honduras, and at a recent art show that painting is part of, I used the Finia Honduras bar to give out as samples to pair with the painting of the place where the beans came from. So that was kind of a fun little connection. Okay, so the process. So what I do is I take the pigment. For the ink that would turn into something more like that, I take, and then this is actually the ink as it's liquid. So what you're doing is you're taking the husks, not the actual ground husks, but the husks, and I put them into a big pot with some water, and I just boil it, and I boil it for hours. I boil it for as long as I want until I get a really nice, rich color. And then that color turns into this. Now, it doesn't last a hugely long time in the fridge because, mold. So I have to use it up fairly quickly, and then make more. So for the paint, that I do use the ground husks, and I use the powder, which is even a finer version. And then I use this gum arabic and some honey and some water, and I can take it out with this. And then I use this expensive fancy Muller. That's my cat Max. Hi Max. And then I use this marble little table over here, and I put those all together, and let's see here. And then this you just kind of move around in circles, and then that mixes all of the paint together. And then what that does is it creates something like this. So this one's the hidden treasure in the corner. That's the powder, so you can see how much more smooth that is. And then that darker stuff is the the husks that I have cooked in the cast iron. Okay. And then just an aside, originally I was trying to figure out how do I create art that is also helping people learn about craft chocolate. And that's where I decided to do a phenology wheel about the process of creating craft chocolate. So I did this about a year ago, and I've been using it in all of my events and markets, and it's a really simple way for folks to get the hang of it. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a little bit of a painting demo. Oh, of course, I used pencils and this kneaded eraser to create the drawing. This drawing is, let's see, I'm going to try to, okay, you can kind of see it like there. Okay, so that image was taken by an old friend that I had from high school. She recently did a trip to Peru to volunteer at an orphanage. She's in Puerto Maldonado. I'm not that familiar with Peru. I'm hoping to get there someday. And she was putting a call out on Facebook about, hey, this orphanage, they've created this cacao farm, and this is how they're getting an income to support themselves. Does anybody know anything about this? And I was like, well, actually, I know a little bit about that. So I told her if she had an image of the place, I would create a painting, and then I would include it in an exhibition. I'm trying to create an exhibition. These paintings are also for sale. I can also take commissions, but it's all about communication. So this painting is the laneway towards the orphanage, and I thought that was really beautiful. I really liked the contrast. Contrast is really important in these paintings as well. So then I did a drawing of it, and I'm going to take paintbrush. Now I have some clean water here, and then this is the ink. So I tend to start with the ink, and I'll just kind of show you. It's very, very light. So another thing that's important with these paintings is layering. If you want to get some really neat effects. So you can see it already does create a difference between the paper and the color. So in watercolor, okay, so when you're using natural inks and paints, you kind of follow some of the guidelines that happen with watercolor painting and oil painting. I'm traditionally an oil painter, but the rule is generally go from light to dark. So what I do is I would start in with some of the sky area, and you sort of start to block in. Here, sorry, I'm watching and also holding the phone. So you kind of can block in some of this. If I want anything to be white, I'm going to leave it the color of the paper. The paper is a really thick, it's called Nichole cotton paper, and I was fortunate enough to know a friend in Victoria who had a whole bunch of it and didn't know what to do with it, and so they gave it to me. So I have a lot of paper to work with, and also a lot of brushes. So, okay, that's to show you how that works. And then what's going to happen is once that dries, I'm going to keep going over it a few times to darken it up a little bit, and I'll show you a final product. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you how each of these behaves. It's really interesting. I find it's really interesting. See, it's kind of like watercolor paper or watercolor paints. The powder, it changes when you work with it. So see how nice and dark and thick that is? And you're not getting a whole lot of graininess because the powder is so fine. So I tend to use the powdered paint closer to the end of the painting process when I want to darken it up, because it can go on fairly opaque. The husks, when they're ground up, they do get a little bit more grainy. When I used to take photography classes way back in high school and even a little bit in university, this was with the old enlargers. They would tell us to learn to love the grain, because you could do a really beautiful photograph and it would have a lot of graininess. Of course, nowadays that's very, very different, but I've kind of had to remind myself of that logic when I'm working with this type of material. You can manipulate it a bit with the ink as well, but you're still going to get some more grain going on in there. And this, because it's a lot lighter, I can play with it and put it right into the painting as well. I could call this a happy little tree, but I'm not sure how happy the trees are. So I'll just call it painting. Okay, hi Soraya. Hi everybody else. I'm seeing lots of waves. That's really awesome. If anybody, I'm kind of seeing the comments. I'm also kind of trying to focus. If anybody does have any questions, if you want to send them to my messages, that would be awesome, and I will definitely get back to you and give you all the answers you want. But I'll try to pay attention to the comments a little bit as well. Okay, let me see if there's a bit of a darker part. In this, there's a lot of sunlight in this piece. So right back here, I can get a little bit, so you have to be a bit careful. My brush that I'm using is a little bit big for this section. Here, let's do a bit of this. So you can kind of take it off, clean off the brush, and then I'm gonna go in with a smaller brush. I'm gonna try to show you what this darker stuff looks like. So we can put this in to this ink here. I don't know how well this is showing up on the live, but you kind of get the idea. So this darker roasted cacao husks that have been roasted in cast iron, they're very grainy, and I actually don't mind it. I think it looks really neat in the piece once these are dry. So when they're wet and when you have the paint wet and like I keep it in the fridge, you probably only gonna have it for a few weeks, maybe 3 weeks, and then it's gonna start to get moldy unless it dries completely, which makes sense. But once I have the paintings done, it's totally stable. Like, I wasn't sure at first, but I've had one of them for at least a year and nothing's changed. The color hasn't shifted, which I thought it was going to fade. I thought it was going to be altered with time, but it seems to be not shifting very much. So that's really wonderful, and I'm really happy about that. So I'm going to show you this painting as well. I put a call out on the Well Tempered Facebook group, which is amazing. I have learned like so much from that group. I am so grateful to Lauren and everybody involved. There's such a wonderful community with craft chocolate. I put a call out for anyone who has access to landscape paintings from Origins, if they would like to be part of this series. And Kim Wilson of Good King Cacao emailed me. She sent me lots of really beautiful photos. This one is Guatemala, and she also sent a really nice, like a nice description of all of the different photos. So yeah, this is a river, and the reflection, you know, you can go a little bit darker in here. There's like a lot of nice shadows to play with, so I was able to use the nice the darker husks, and yeah, so that's kind of, I tend to use the grainier parts when I'm getting into like foliage and trees. Some of the darker, you can see it gets a little more flat, and also the color does change as it dries. So yeah, like especially the cocoa powder one, it's gonna be a lot more rich when it's still a little bit wet, and then as it dries, it gets flat. A lot more flat, and you can kind of see it happening in here. The other thing I play with is a bit of vinegar and baking soda, because it can alter the color a little bit. I don't have any of that out right now, but I find that the baking soda pushes it more towards pink, and the vinegar will push it more towards a yellow. So to kind of, get my range a little bit wider with these really beautiful sepia tones that you can grab with cocoa, I do play with the acid, with the pH level. But yeah, as baking soda dries, this doesn't have baking soda in it, but as baking soda dries, it gets very, very flat looking. So as an oil painter, I struggle a little bit with that, because I really love how oil encases the pigment and refracts light and can create some like gorgeous effects. So, but yeah, the end results I'm very, very pleased with. So, yeah, I'm not sure how many people are new with this, but I'm just going to do one more sweep around all of the different elements. And then I guess if anybody has any questions, I'll take a couple minutes for that. Hi, Lauren. I went through pretty much most of it. But this will be available. I'm going to try to make it available on my stories as well. I'm going to flip this around and say hi again. I don't know if anybody has any questions, or that was kind of confusing. Do they smell like chocolate when they're dry? I don't know. I know when they're wet. I'm going to say no. That didn't smell like chocolate. It definitely smells like brownies when I'm making it. When the painting is done, there is no mold because there's no moisture. When the ink and paint is in the fridge, definitely the ink, because it's like mostly water, it's going to grow mold. So I have to keep making it fairly regularly. I generally try to make it like right before I'm going to use it, and then use as much of it as I can. And then I can create like these evaporation paintings as well if I have extra ink left over. But generally, like see this one I've had for a while, so it was starting to get a little bit less ideal. So I'm going to make some more next time I want to try to really dive into some paintings. But yeah, no mold once they're dry. They don't smell like chocolate when they're dry, but definitely when they're wet. Like all of this here smells like brownies baking. How long does it take to paint? Okay, so it depends on the painting. Usually, because you have to do it in layers, I'm going to say it takes days. I can probably work like a bunch of layers into this paint, like one layer into this painting in about an hour, maybe 2 hours, depends on the process, depends on the size of the painting, depends on the complexity of the reference photo. And then I'm going to let it dry, and then I'm going to go back into it. I'm probably going to go back into it 2 or 3 or 4 times, depending on the picture. Yeah, so the Well-Tempered series, that's this series. So I'm doing a lot of landscape paintings of origin. So right now I have 5 or 6. Okay, so what I'm going to do, the plan is with the paintings, here, I'll do that for a second. The plan is with the paintings for now, they are for sale, so contact me if you're like, I really would love this is amazing, but I want to create an exhibition, and I want to pair the paintings with a bar that is made with beans from the same bar. I used this Honduras bar in a recent exhibition with the painting of Honduras, and I gave out samples of that bar. I would have like, a bunch of different bars. I probably wouldn't sample all of them, but that's just one idea for what to do with the paintings. Would it stay on fabric if you painted shoes or a t-shirt? Yes, every origin has made some different colors. I don't know about fabric. I don't think it would be ideal, because anything with fabric, that's more a dye. This is an ink. There's a lot of they're called fugitive colors, and I do have a friend in town who creates more like fabric and clothing, and I've given her some husks, and she can experiment with them because she's more into making dyes. She hasn't got back to me if it's really been lasting, but my guess is that this is would fall into the category of what's called a fugitive ink or dye, and it would come out in the wash over time. Yeah. So that's what I'm going to say about that. The paper, I find that using the paper is a lot more forgiving and long-lasting, and I kind of call it food for the soul, because you're going to have this like gorgeous thing that you can enjoy for a long time. I'm not sure if I missed a question. Is there a place we can see them online? Yes, I'm going to put them on my website. They're currently there's a bunch of them on my Instagram and posts, and very exciting news. They're going to be featured in the spring edition of Read Cacao. So I'm very, very excited about this article. Recacao is fantastic, and they've been so phenomenal and fun to work with. And so they're creating this like gorgeous article that's going to be featuring the paintings. So I can also make eco-friendly prints with the paintings if you don't want to have like the painting itself. But their magazine is going to have these gorgeous prints of them. So just buy a magazine and then you would have some of the paintings. But yeah, it's like if there's a place that's near and dear to your heart and you want painting within like made with cacao paint, then that's also possible. So yeah, if that's all of the questions, I'm not sure. I'm going to say hi to the folks that are joining. I'm going to try to see if I can add this to my stories so that you can go through and see the process of like how the paint is made and applied and some of the questions that are answered. Can these ink or dye be used to stamp other materials like boxes, bags, labels? I don't know if I would use it as like a stamp ink because you need to really work in layers. That's what I've been finding. You need to work in layers with it. So say you like painted the stamp and then you stamped it on, it probably wouldn't show up very strongly. Like I'll show you, let's see here. Okay, so like some of this paint would probably show up fairly strong. So that would be okay, but it does dry like really flat. It's kind of hard to show it in this light. But yeah, you can definitely, I'm going to say you can definitely experiment with it. Because it has gum arabic, that's a really good binder, and honey, it's going to have like a good longevity. It's going to be resistant to aging, but like a lot of materials, it can fade. Things can happen, right? So the other term that's used quite often with these types of inks is called living inks. And that just means that you don't exactly know what's going to happen over time. But I did learn that like even Leonardo da Vinci and a lot of master painters, they used what would be called like traditional paints and they fell apart after not very long. So it's all very experimental, but it's been a lot of fun, and I'm really happy with the results of the paintings. Yeah, they smell like brownies when I'm making them and when I'm making the ink and the paint, but when they're dry, they just don't really have a smell. So that's about it. So I'm gonna sign off. I'm gonna say thank you all so much for joining. I've been loving this stay at home with Chocolate Festival. I'm going to keep watching, and I'm going to keep watching everything as it gets loaded up to people's stories and YouTube afterwards. And if you have any more questions or you want to know anything else, just shoot me a message. All right. Have a great day. Bye-bye.